Hi there, and welcome to the next episode of the Business Blind Spots Exposed podcast. My company, Carmo, just to give you a sense of why we're doing this podcast, my company, Carmo, is all about building culture intelligence. It's all about people and understanding how people work and the way they behave by using data to help you understand that. Using this data, we can find better outcomes for the employees, for the business, and for the customers. But that data is all fantastic. It's all wonderful. But if you don't know what the blind spots are that are keeping your employees, your business, and your customers from having a better experience, it's all for naught. The purpose of this podcast is to help people understand what those blind spots are. We bring on experts, we bring on leaders in the industry to talk about the various components of how to run your business, they have run their business, mistakes that they have made, and where they started to use data and the numbers and the information already within their business to find a better outcome. A couple of things here. You'll find the chat box. I would love to see who's on. Just join us and tell us where you're from on the podcast. And hey, Troy, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. I'm doing great. Give me a couple more seconds here. I want to just give people a snapshot of what's coming up today and what's coming up on our podcast. So let me start with a couple of events that we've got coming up here in the next couple of weeks. On March 23rd, I've got Edmund Mackey about delivering a company vision and an approach and using data to outlay that strategy and that pathway to success. On 3/18, I've got Ryan Ray, who's talking to us about the numbers behind people and getting them re-engaged, how the numbers have played out in his organization to create greater engagement through the numbers. And today we've got Troy on, who's going to be talking to us a little bit more. But before I get started with Troy, let me tell you a little bit about who he is and what he does and the name of his company, so you'll understand a little bit more. So I'm going to read a little bit, Troy, about your background. So you're an expert business strategist. You specialize in technology benefits and employee engagement. And I think that's the part that I really enjoyed the most when we first talked, is this idea of leaning in with technology to get greater employee engagement. You're the director of national director of sales at People Strategy, and it's focused on the small and medium-sized business sector. You're also an outspoken advocate in the fight against domestic minor sex trafficking. You founded Mission Haven with your wife Hilda, building the largest care community for child survivors of DMST, or domestic minor sex trafficking. You have a son in college, a dog, and 3 cats. And I love this part. Your first job was as a Easter bunny.
I was the Easter bunny, yeah. Fond memories of being the Easter bunny. So
I think I got to start there. Tell me about the Easter bunny.
Oh man. Honestly, it was I had a buddy who was working in the mall, and apparently the Easter bunny decided to quit, and so he knew the mall manager, and they were looking for somebody, and I just was the first person they saw. So I could take the job literally immediately. So they put the suit on me that day, and I had kids sitting in my lap like 10 minutes later.
So I'm kind of curious. I've never been an Easter bunny before. It's not something that's just kind of been in my professional path. What did you learn as an Easter bunny? I gotta imagine kids coming up to you was that different than what you'd expected? I mean, kids are coming up to you and just like tugging at your arms and saying, "Hey, I want to be next." Is that kind of what it was like?
The hardest part about it was just not talking to the kids, because I really enjoy kids. I enjoy hanging out with them, and I just love, kind of their interest in things. And so I think the hardest part was, like, I had to remember I was wearing the suit, because it wasn't something I'd been doing for a while. And honestly, it was only like one day before Easter. So it was a short career as the Easter bunny.
Gotcha. Well, the reason I had you on today is because, the way I tell people is, in any business, 99% of all the opportunities and risks begin and end with people. We're all in the people business. That's Absolutely. It, right?
Yeah.
what you all do as a company, people strategy, is all about the people business too. Tell me a little more about people strategy first, and a little bit about what you all do, so everyone has a little understanding of where you're coming from.
Yeah, sure. So People Strategy is an organization that provides technology to organizations that also provides a lot of and around the topic, a lot of transparency in the data and access to all the data within the system. I think uniquely, a lot of systems out there are disparate and don't have the ability to pull in the data from all the different aspects, from recruiting and and HR to performance management to time management and kind of all the components you need to make good strategic decisions around your human capital. And so that's something that we do. We're also a benefits provider, so we provide a lot of services around that and compliance. And just providing best practices and recommendations with an innovative approach.
So tell me, who is the profile of the customer? I mean, I think it's small. I mean, small and medium sized businesses, what I understand. Tell me a little more. Where are they as a company when they first approach you, or you approach them, whatever the case may be? Where are they? Where is the hurt?
Yeah, I think one of the things that really attracted me to People Strategy was that they were an enterprise class technology provider that had a long history and experience with some of the US's largest organizations. So what they really did in developing the new people strategy system is they reverse engineered what they were doing for these larger organizations, because initially the organization had started off supporting sunsetting technologies. So like Genesis, was a good example of that. And so they took all that intellectual capital and they deployed a strategy to really bring those same types of data and processes that you see from much larger organizations down to the small and medium-sized business. So currently we have clients on the platform that have many thousands of employees all the way down to say 5 or 6 employees. And so we've got a good spectrum of clientele on the platform. And the great thing about it is that it's scalable, right? So we help clients that, start with the very tactical kind of blocking and tackling the day-to-day things to the very strategic type organizations. And the system opens up as the client needs to access more and more of the platform.
So give me an example. I mean, as a company, we tend to focus in, I'll say roughly, in companies that have 10 to 250 employees. By the time you start talking to 250, there's probably multiple locations. Right. There's multiple different types of roles, geographies that they've got to worry about. Talk to me about sort of a progression from, that 5 or 10 on the smaller side to the larger companies. What do you see in that progression there? What sort of changes in what the organization needs?
Well, let me start with what they don't know, right? And that's most business owners, that are kind of going through that process of growth and expansion, whether it's multi-state or multi-location. The complexities change and the requirements change, and a lot of times they move into thresholds where they don't understand the landscape, they don't understand the requirements. And so, they a lot of times feel like they're ready for the next step. And honestly, they almost need to take a step back before they put themselves in situations where, they could be out of compliance. And so the journey that we take our clients on is very much consultative, but also making sure that we're kind of putting bumpers on the lane to protect the organization from potential pitfalls that exists. And depending on who the administration is right now, there's a more of a focus on different aspects of compliance and what's important. And so those things, as they change, and they will, from time to time, you want a partner that is going to be able to be proactive with those things and really truly understands not only what does it look like for a small organization, right? Kind of just getting things like just payroll done to the complexities that you see with, having to manage ACA compliance or FMLA or ADA support. So just having that contact and that point of contact where you can call somebody and really ask the questions, and honestly, somebody who's being proactively, looking over your shoulder to make sure that you're doing things properly.
Now, the word that I've heard many times in the past and that you've used, which makes some sense to me. But just that I come from a technology background, so terminology, I'm probably a lot more comfortable with it. HRIS, Human Resources Information System. Break that down for me. Does everybody know what an HRIS system is the first time you talk to them about it, or kind of where are they in that journey of understanding what you all do?
Yeah, so we're dealing with, it can be, just controllers or CFOs, bookkeepers, to, you know, chief human resource officers, right? And there's a myriad of different people kind of in between the two. I would say that most people do understand what HRIS means. There's also HRMS, or management system. It's really the same thing. Ultimately, they're usually familiar with some portion of that in the smaller marketplace. So, a lot of times you see like a lot of organizations out there just offer one piece of that. Could be just a basic payroll platform or HR platform, or even just time and attendance. But a true HRIS system is something that is more of a single stack platform that really manages the entire life cycle of an employee. So kind of end to end, hire to retire, kind of cradle to grave sort of scenario, and all the moving pieces. And so that's the class of technology that people strategy would fall into. And like I said, there's a variety of different, aspects of that. But our system is modular, so it does represent those separate pieces. And so the clients that we work with, a lot of times it's serving them where they're at right now, and sometimes they're not ready for all of it. And I think that allows us to really meet clients where they're at today. And many times what you find out is there are systems out there that run out of gas. The system that got you here won't get you there, kind of perspective. And even though they may claim to be an HRIS, it doesn't necessarily encompass everything that the HRIS should include.
And I think part of what gave you all that capability to continue to scale is the fact that you started with it started as an enterprise class application.
That's right.
For organizations with many thousands of employees, and you distilled some of those concepts, brought it downstream, so that the company with 5 could access some of those modules that they can now start to capitalize on, and then as they move upstream, they can just turn on the button. Right. Is that right?
Turn it on, open it up. Yep, for sure.
Gotcha. So, look, the purpose of this podcast is blind spots.
Yep.
And for me, just in terms of personal journey, I've bumped up against the same walls, or bumped, skinned my knuckles, or scraped my knuckles, or whatever the saying is there, too many times, and I started to see from other perspectives, I could potentially maybe skin my knuckles one less time. Right? You're gonna do it. And the purpose of this podcast is to bring some of the people on who've seen people, or have experienced it themselves, or seen others go through that. So, tell me, what is the first thing that you see in organizations that may not have an HRIS system or HRMS system? What is the first, I'll call it, the glass ceiling that they're bumping up against that they just can't punch through? What is that one that you see first?
Well, first off, I want to say that, like, not understanding your data as an organization is similar. I would liken it to like the head coach of a football team not knowing the down and distance every single play, right?
Yeah. Right.
You've got to understand, what you're up against, right, to be able to make smart decisions. And I think the glass ceiling ultimately when it comes to data, and specifically HR, is that HR people, have, traditionally been, unwilling a lot of times to embrace the technology that exists out there for the purpose of understanding their organization. And being able to make good decisions with that data, or they would like that, and budgets wouldn't allow for them to be able to implement a system that would truly be best in class for their end-to-end experience, employee experience, et cetera. So,
as a company that's trying to build culture through data, right? I mean, I think what we do are very complementary as opposed to overlapping. When we talk about data, sometimes people start thinking about cold, hard facts, and gosh, I don't really want to be that way with my employees.
Right.
I think there's a better story to be told so you can understand your employees better. Is that what you see as well? And is that what you mean by saying you need to understand and be able to embrace the data in your company? It's all about knowing your employees better. Is that right?
Right. It's not only about knowing your employees' data. Better. It's also about being able to take action steps to make it better. Right. So a lot of people do think about data, and they think Spock, right? They're like, that guy has no personality, right? Or you think Rain Man, like Dustin Hoffman, right? You're like, oh my gosh, right? And I've met people like that in my past, that really look at it. But data can be so much more than that, especially if it's easy to access and easy to understand. And I think that's the challenge for a lot of organizations that have disparate systems, is that if your systems for managing people aren't interconnected, right? And you don't have one centralized area to report that data, and you can't put it in ways that like a visual person might understand it, right? So potentially graphs and maybe different ways of pulling the data in to understand it. Then you're going to be challenged to want to use it, right? Because it could be a bigger project than it feels like it's worth. But that's why you have to have the right partners to help you pull those things together, so that you have a strategic plan for not only getting the data in front of you, digesting it, and then taking action steps with it.
And I see we've got a number of people who are listening in. I'd encourage you, just tell us who you are, where you're calling, where you're dialing in, or connecting from, I guess is the right term. Just love to see who's on. So please type into the chat where you're connecting from. Taking better action. I'll tell you, I'm probably still a kid at heart in the sense that I love stories. So, Troy, tell me a story. Tell me a story about how you took someone from where before they had an HRS system or any of this data, and you were able to make that story and give it the fairy tale ending, if you will. Tell me a story there.
Yeah, I think it's about. Have you ever looked? And I'll tell you a story. But have you ever looked at one of those books? I remember looking at them as a young kid, where you're trying to see the image, and it looks like just wavy lines and things like this. And then you get up really close and you cross your eyes and you like pull your face away from it, right? And I think that when you think about people's businesses or what their core responsibilities are, whether it's an HR manager or CEO of a company, I think a lot of times they're kind of like right here trying to see the big picture. And I can't tell you time and time again where I've had clients that were so close to like the business that they couldn't see the bigger picture, right? And they couldn't make strategic decisions because they were so focused on managing a poor employee, right? Or they were so focused on, tracking, just hours and criticizing, different pieces of it. And they didn't understand the bigger picture. I remember in my first conversation with you, you were talking about some of the things that, the business owners you work with were hyper focused on, when really, that was actually a positive if you looked at the bigger picture. Maybe somebody not speeding, for example, right? In their vehicle, now they're not getting tickets, or they were speeding and they actually got there on time. So their intentions were good, even though you're slapping them on the hand for getting a ticket or driving too fast, right? And so when you're so close to the business that you don't have the ability to take a look back, I think it's challenging for you to see what's important. And what our system has been able to do is allow clients to have everything in one place, eliminating what I love to call administrivia, right? Just the busyness of HR, the onboarding process, the process of, having to link systems and export and import files, right? Having it all succinctly operate through automation, right? Is an important thing. And I think the interesting thing is that companies still choose to create situations where they're not able to connect those systems. And they do that. It doesn't make any sense to me. Why wouldn't you want one system that does everything? And so for me, that what's been eye-opening for my clients is when they get into a solution that is end-to-end, they finally kind of eyes open, like, wow, this is so much better than having a payroll system and a time and attendance system and oh, by the way, we have a benefits broker that, is outside of that system, and their technology, they bring their own thing that doesn't speak to this over there and that over there. So I think it really is something everybody should experience, in managing their business.
So I'm kind of curious, based on some of the folks that are listening in, this term that Troy just threw out there, administrivia. Do you feel like that's something that kind of bogs you down? I know it has for me in the past. Just you're kind of down in the details, you're down in the weeds, and you spend so much time down in the weeds, you can't get to raising the gaze or looking up and looking at the playing field as opposed to looking at your feet. I used to play a lot of soccer.
I play a little football. I used to play for this guy right here. I played for John Elway. So.
Yeah, so just that idea of administrivia, I'm kind of curious if there are people on the line or connected in who feel like they spend too much time in administrivia or have noticed other people spending too much time in administrivia. Troy, one of the things that I tell people about all the time is this idea of decision velocity, right? How fast can you truly make good decisions? If you talk about a professional football team, we just had the Super Bowl not too long ago. Can you imagine being the coach of a football team and not being able to make a decision on a play until 3 days later, 30 days later?
Yep.
I mean, what a terrible way to run a team.
We're talking 20 or 30 seconds later. I mean, like if they don't have the eyes in the sky and the tablets in their hand, how good are the decisions that they're making? Like in the moment, right?
That's right. So how is it that you run a business where, you look at your numbers every 30 days? Well, how can you tell, hey, Johnny, on February 19th at 11:11 a.m., I didn't like what you did. What are you talking about? I don't even remember what happened that day. It was so long ago. Yeah. And I think that's part of what you're talking about here is using the football analogy here, can you start making decisions faster, more insightful decisions faster, because you start to see how the game is developing as it happens, as opposed to waiting a month later trying to say, hey, Monday morning quarterbacking, right? I think that's what they call it, right? Is that kind of, that's the sort of the transition that people go to as they start to use your system? Am I getting that right?
Yeah. So you don't have to worry about the lagging indicators because it's all real-time data, right? Think about, most systems you have to import, data, and then you have to wait for the system to analyze it. It's usually, 30 days after the fact. I think of a lot of accounting systems that kind of operate that way, right? They take all this information, they put it into maybe an Excel document, right? And then it analyzes it, but that's not going to allow you to make real-time decisions. And so having, a platform that does that is certainly going to be an advantage when, the speed of business is increasing, right? So you've got to be ready to make, game time, decisions really quickly.
I heard a quote once that I've started to pay a lot of attention to. I've started to notice a lot. What you say to people doesn't matter as much as how you make them feel.
Right.
When coming into an organization, what are the owners, what is the leaders, senior leadership, how do they feel when you first talk to them? What is the source of feeling that begins the conversation, and what is sort of the resistance to using the system, why they don't move forward? Or what is it that you've got to overcome to get them there?
I think one of the challenges is certainly that people are fearful of change. They believe that their employees are fearful of change, and that's probably true. I think when you think about any decision, it's usually the status quo that trumps, right? I think in general in the B2B world, I think it's over 65% of decisions are delayed or stalled completely. In any sort of change, approach. But what I would say is that, it's one of those things where it takes a lot of courage to go ahead and say, you know what, we're going to change things because I believe it's better for the organization. And I think what typically prevents that is that everything is by committee nowadays, right? And so you're talking about, what do people think and feel, and I think. You have to win the hearts and minds of people, and that's from the top down, right? Because if you really truly believe it's better for your company, you have to be able to convey that to the people who have to make the change. and you have to evangelize it within the organization, and that impacts a lot of people when you talk about HR, right? It's not a lot of times, even the system that I'm talking about, more of a single source type approach to managing HR. That's a big undertaking for a lot of organizations. And so you want to make sure you get it right and with the right people. Um, but I would say that, a lot of times the biggest problem, like, I don't know if anybody else has read this book, but have you heard or read the book or heard of it? Everybody Lies.
I have heard of it. I have not read it.
Oh, it's a wonderful read. Basically, Seth Stevens Davowitz, I think is his name, talks about how he gets all the data from Google on what people are searching for. Right? These are people that like, Google doesn't lie, the data doesn't lie, everybody else does, right? And the interesting thing about it is, like, you would never expect some of the things that people are looking for, and they're interested in. And certainly there's an ebb and flow depending on what's trendy today or what happened, like when Kobe Bryant died or things like that. But outside of that, it's just interesting. And so data will tell you a lot. And if you don't have that within your organization, your employees will lie to you, right? They will not tell you the truth because they're afraid a lot of times. And that's where it takes good EQ or emotional intelligence for you to discern, right? What does that mean? Or even better than EQ is good data, because the data will tell you what's going on.
I've got some kids in grade school, and one of the things I always tell them is my father taught me this idea of using averages to do math calculations, right? Okay. They said, well, if you're doing 50 times 50, or if someone asks you 51 times 53, I don't know off the top of my head. I got to sit down and take a second to think about it. You used to always tell me, do 50 times 50, and you'll at least know you're in the ballpark. I think what I'm hearing from you is, by getting this data, it's not about I have all the answers, but you're kind of in the ballpark and kind of can call, if you need to call BS on someone, you say, that's not what's happening. By the same token, if you can lean in and say, let me tell you what I understand is happening. Can I help you kind of get over that hump so you can get to that next level? Is that what I'm hearing?
That's exactly what you're saying. You can make a lot better decisions. Look, I think that a lot of people make decisions by their gut, right? I know you've heard that. I can these gut decisions, right? But what if you could support those decisions? Like, I think good people have good intentions. Obviously, CEOs that are, I think they have a couple different things. A lot of times you have to get a little bit lucky. There's always that element, right? To have the right service for the right people at the right time. But there's some grit there. But intuition, I think, good CEOs have a little bit of intuition. And what if you could back that up with solid data, right? And your decisions were matching up with the data. The data says this, and I was already feeling like we needed to do this, right? Or what if it's the opposite, right? The data doesn't support that. How much money did you save? How much time and energy and heartache, and potentially key personnel did you not lose because you made a really poor decision? I've been I've been a part of organizations that made really good decisions and ones that made bad ones that made me leave, right? And I've always been a high performer everywhere I've went, and so I'm not saying I'm the greatest thing since sliced bread. I'm just saying you don't want to lose people that move the needle or move the ball down the field and closer to the end zone, and that's what happens when you don't rely on good data to make decisions. And today, there's no excuse not to have it. You can have it all in one place, right? So why wouldn't you?
This is interesting. The thought that comes up as you're talking about this is, as you start to build kind of this data-driven HR in your organization, there's also this concept of, I've tried to think about, so look, you've kind of got the mind, you've kind of got the gut, and sort of the heart. Is sort of the three tools I think of when I'm making decisions. The gut is valuable, but the problem is the gut also suffers from what I'll call recency bias, right? You can only remember maybe the last 3 weeks, especially if you have 10, 15, 20 employees. At some point in time, you don't know all the facts.
Yeah.
At some point in time, and this is probably what gets a lot of people into hot water. They get rid of people that should have stuck around. It's just the last 3 weeks, their mother had COVID, right? And they've slacked off a little bit because their mom was sick. But right. You saw something that you thought was happening, and the last 3 weeks kind of proved it out, but you weren't necessarily objectively looking at it.
Right.
And that's what this will allow you to do is, hey, let's see if that's really the truth. I think just from a liability point of view, there's probably a lot of benefit to doing that. Am I getting that right as well?
Well, certainly from a liability standpoint. But yes, I think just from a continuity standpoint, having a deeper understanding of your employees, I think empathy is something that is not just trendy, but important for organizations to have. I mean, through COVID, it's been extremely challenging for a lot of people who are either dealing with people who are sick or just isolation. I think has been equally hard for people. Organizations have closed their doors, right? So, whether it's, family businesses that have been around for 40 or 50 years to, all kinds of different things. So I think it's incredibly important for you to have all the facts before you make bad decisions like that, or rash decisions, right?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to backfill that position. I mean, even if you're fast 6 months before they're back at operational status.
And it's costly. Yeah.
That's right. So I heard this first blind spot is not understanding your data, and you got to embrace the data, take better actions. What else? What else do you see that are, I'll call it chinks in the armor, that you see from kind of coming in?
Yeah, I think some of the chinks just might be having some of the data or focusing on certain things more than others. One of the things I've heard of many times is that now HR leaders are focusing on turnover data, right? Which is, I think, is good, right? So now they're focusing on that. It's a little bit. It was forward thinking, probably half a dozen to 10 years ago to really look at that. And I can honestly tell you, a lot of organizations still aren't looking at it, but the ones that are have not really evolved or progressed beyond that. So they're not looking at key performance indicators. I mean, you see all these things in organizations that leverage big data. We're talking the biggest companies in the world. And I'm not saying you have to emulate all of it, but why do they use it? Do you think there's an advantage to it? There's a reason why they're doing it, right? Is because there's an advantage to it, to understanding the data and why it actually should be leveraged, or just to simply know that you maybe have a problem. I remember reading an article about Google where they identified an OxyContin problem in one of their offices because they could see that there was prescriptions that were being fulfilled in just that office like crazy. And so they actually went in and were able to help with, providing, they didn't tell them why they were doing it, but they were providing guidance and help to their employees, saying, hey, look, we've got resources for this stuff. They weren't deploying that everywhere because it wasn't necessarily a problem everywhere. But this specific office, they deployed specific resources. And so what if you had the ability to kind of intervene, and help your employees, to correct course, right? And that's a unique example, but those happen all the time.
So what I heard here is kind of having incomplete information. I mean, if you've got an incomplete information, you don't understand the whole picture. And as the senior leader in an organization, manager in an organization, you're really the coach for those employees. And in order for a coach to be able to, I used to run track. If my coach does not know how I ran my last 400 meter, and has that been improving over time? Is it slumping? What are my splits at each one of the 100-meter marks? They can start to tell me here, hey, look, here's I want you to save a little bit more, and I want you to put more of a kick on the last 300, last 100 meters, whatever the case may be, right? But by getting some of this information, then it pushes you or empowers you more in this role of a coach to get maximum results and productivity and profitability out of that employee to an end that they probably want as well. I mean, they want to be valued,
right?
And it puts them into that position, right?
Yeah, it also puts you in a position, if you understand your employees better, you can see where there's leading and lagging indicators that can help with maybe right positioning somebody. I mean, a lot of times, people, they're great employees, but they're not set up for success because they're not in the right role. And so if you have good data, you can identify those strengths and weaknesses more effectively. And that goes actually back to leadership, right? So leadership is an important component of this too. So, are you deploying the right programs to help your leaders be more effective in coaching and training your employees and onboarding and all the other things that are necessary to help the organization thrive, right? And so that's something that you also don't have if you're not leveraging, the right data points.
So that brings up a really interesting. I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story here. I was many years ago. I was running a government contracting company, and I went and took a class. I've told this story once before, and it was I'm sitting there just typing away on my laptop. This guy is just saying stuff. Wah 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 wah. I understand what he's saying. And he makes a statement. He says, and the problem is most often times it's the leadership that is holding the company back. And I look up from my laptop, slightly offended, like. Pound
talking to me?
Yeah. Well, what are you talking about? I'm the one who's driving this organization forward. And he points at me. He's like, that's exactly what I'm talking about. You don't realize that you're the bottleneck to success and he lays out a bunch of reasons. There's egos involved here, even though you don't notice it sometimes, because the management, the senior leadership doesn't know how they're precluding or preventing employees from doing better. This gives you a lens into that, doesn't it? I mean, hey, there's a ceiling that each one of my employees hit. Why is that ceiling there? It's probably pointing at you.
Right. Yeah. It could be all kinds of different things, but at least you can look at points of data and maybe notice a trend that specifically it may not even be the top officer. It may be individual leaders. I've had leaders over the years that maybe were effective in the markets they were in, and then they move into other markets and they're way less effective because maybe their communication style isn't really well received. I'm thinking, some people that have led me over the years out of the Northeast that have come down, and and I'm from California. I'm pretty easygoing, but you start pointing the finger and yelling at people and cussing at them, and you're like, wow, man, like. You could have just asked me nicely, right? I'd run through a brick wall if you'd asked me nicely, but if you're going to cuss and scream at me, so I don't know that there's any leading indicators for cussing and screaming, but you can see how the performance, of a leader can either be, stifled or, or like you said, reach a ceiling, of some format, just based on even just a change in location, right? Hey, this guy was or lady was a high performer here, but over here they're not performing very well, and this is a market that traditionally has. Now you can ask the question why, right?
Yeah. I'm curious. So we've had more people join us, and hopefully this is I take that to believe that this is a very interesting conversation. I would love for people to tell us, what do you think is the number one problem that you've had in and around managing people? What is it? What is that has kept you up at night, or keeps you up at night today, or has kept you up at night? I'm curious. Please type those in the comments. I like this idea of leading and lagging indicators, and what it means to me is lagging indicators. All the stuff that's happened, you can't change it. It's now in the books, right?
Right.
But the leading indicators, the stuff that I can start to say, all right, there's a knob I can adjust here. The accelerator on the car, right? I see 70 miles an hour. I can lift off the pedal because speed limit 65.
Right.
The same way with employees, with these leading indicators, you can now start to figure out that you're pushing too hard. Why are your insurance premiums too high? Because revenue hours is how you're paying them, and they're all starting to get speeding tickets. Right? The light bulb moments go off. Is that something that you've witnessed as people start to move towards this kind of data-driven HR?
Yeah, I think that's the advantage, right, of implementing something, because most organizations have limited resources, and so they're already going to be taxed with the amount of things that they can get done. But by taking maybe the little extra time of implementing the right systems, it actually frees them up to focus more on understanding the organization and what makes it happen. I think there's a lot of times a fear of leadership that if they eliminate some work from their plate, that they're also going to lose resources. And I would deeply encourage leaders, executive leaders within an organization, not to make that a trend, because if they are truly looking to move their organization forward, what they want to do is repurpose those resources within their organization, those people that have been dedicated to your goals and your success, and allow them to grow into new positions where they can be leveraged even more successfully, and not to do automation for the purpose of just automation, right? But to take those resources and push them forward, because I think that there's always this fear, and that's the reason why I see a lot of times people not making the change, and leaders falling into the same category. If I automate these things, I'm going to lose X, Y, and Z people, and that shouldn't be a fear that they have, right? That's not really the purpose of automation.
Yeah, two things that come up to me. Number one is this idea that when you start to automate the systems, look, just like you, I think I've done pretty well in my career. I tell people that the lowest I've ever gotten out of 100 on a ranking was 94, but yet I was always, pretty much every job I've ever had, I was always scared that I was going to get fired, and kind of like, well, that doesn't make any sense. You got a 94 as your lowest. Well, it's because no one ever told me how I was being measured. If someone told me on a weekly basis, even on a biweekly or monthly basis, here's a report card, because that's what I grew up getting, right?
Right.
B's and probably a lot more C's and D's, but at least I knew where I stood. So automation of the system and being able to tell people where they stand, actually, what it might seem a little scary, actually, it gives them an opportunity to opt in to doing better if they want to, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's again, do you have the tools to be able to do that effectively? Because I think that most leaders would like to understand what their employees are doing, but do they have a system that's integrated for things like pulse surveys? Are they asking the right questions? Do they have some way of some formalized way of following up with employees, not just when they see performance declines, but also are they doing anything to recognize their employees, right, for successes and jobs well done? I think that the answer is typically no, and or so inconsistently that it's almost worthless, right? That's the purpose of having a system, is that it's something that you can repeat, and technology is at the point where you can have your cake and eat it too.
So something I always like to think of for myself personally, and I've started to kind of lean more and more into this, is, look, I've got limited time on this earth, just like every one of us does, and I think that's I think you could put a period at the end of that sentence. And because my time is limited, how do I amplify the amount of time that I have? Right? How do I get the maximal value out of it? Instead of taking time exporting spreadsheets, pulling them into other spreadsheets, doing all this massaging, all this stuff 30 days later, if I get a system to do it for me, now I can stop spending time on the squeaky wheel, because I'm always trying to just lift them up. I can start to spend time on the ones that are actually most valuable, most effective in my organization, and help them do better, because that's really that squeaky wheel. I mean, they can either kind of pull their socks up and join the rest of the crew, or see you later, right? I love you, but you're not meeting my expectations. This allows you to automate paying attention to those that you kind of really care about and never want to leave, right? Leaning into those people.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's not just HR, right? It really is across the organization. I'm a big believer that technology is one of those things that, when leveraged properly, gives you more time with the people that you care about.
Yeah.
Right. It can also be a huge distraction. Like I used to play stupid little games on my phone. This is a long time ago, but what I noticed is I was spending time looking at my phone, and I don't do social media all that much either, to be honest with you, because I think it again gives you some false representation of what life is supposed to look like. It's everybody's A role, right, versus my B role, which I'm living right now, right? Everybody's living their best life now, sort of situation. And that's not the case. But what I do think the systems do is they give you more time to spend, again, with the people that you care about, right? More face-to-face time. And today with COVID, I think that's more important than anything, right? Is that, like if we get to spend more time with our family during this kind of whole lockdown season, or with other people within our organization, I think those are all good things because automation has kind of picked that up. But what happens, I think, is a lot of times we just ask more of people, which is understandable. There was some statistics about the average work week I read back in the 1920s. I think we were working somewhere around 60 hours a week. And now the average human in the United States is working somewhere right around 31, 32 hours per week, like actually working. And so technology has proven that now, we can do a lot more because of it. But what are we doing with that extra time, right? Are we spending it with things that matter? Or are we spending it on, things that don't? And I think, again, going back to the statement we said earlier, like, are you spending your time in the right areas, and is there a system that could take that over for you? And I think in most cases, the answer is yes, if you're willing to take a little bit of time to implement something, or a better process.
So this reminds me of a conversation I had with a panel of some business leaders, and my company has been going through some fantastic growth, which is a luxury of problems to have, but it is still a problem. And the question I asked of that panel, I said, "What advice do you have?" And look, I've got all this growth, I'm putting the right people in place, and something that scares me is this idea that someone would leave. And everyone kind of took a second and said, well, basically it boils down to, Vinay, you're asking the wrong question. The right question is more about how are you leaning into those people that they can't leave because they love you so much, right?
Right.
Because replacing that person, if it would hurt if they left, I'm just talking sort of figuratively, hug them tighter, right? You may not necessarily be able to do that, but hug them tighter, make them feel loved, make them feel like every single day when they walk in that you do love them. And that doesn't mean you have to pay them more, right? I mean, it's really just, hey, Jack, thanks for coming by today. I really love what you've been doing for us this week. Thanks, right? I mean, I've heard so many times, it's not about compensation all the time. It's just an attaboy. That's all you need. And this is how you can do that is by seeing the data that proves that out to you. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, it goes back to the thought of wellness, right? Too, everybody has things that are important to them, and they're different. But even just asking somebody how their day is going goes a long ways, right? Being intentional about those things. And again, if you free up time with better systems, then it gives you the ability to be more personable with people. But if you're going to take that and you're just going to hide in your office and you're not going to be interacting with people, I don't know that that's going to help you. Then we go back to the leadership development side, because those things will be picked up in the data as well. Sally has great leadership skills. Her people love her. We've got a mood dashboard. Every time you log into our system, right, it asks, hey, are you having a great day or not? How are you feeling today? And one of the things that can do is that can give you data on, hey, this department is not doing well. Right. This manager, is their people aren't doing well. And so you can look at those sorts of things and really make better decisions well before, they're systematic problems.
So got a number of people have been following us for a little while here, and you've been quiet. So I'd be curious if you've been sticking on for so long. What are the lessons learned here? What are the kind of the key nuggets that you've been picking up? I would love to hear what you walk away from this session with. I would love to kind of hear Troy's thoughts on what you picked up, if there's any more depth he can give to those ideas. In the meanwhile, look, I always like to start with easy steps, right? If someone, the best thing that you can do is just take the first step forward. If someone wants to go down this path and say, hey, look, I really want to build a better culture, a more intentional culture, I want to get greater engagement out of employees, give me 3 steps. What are the first 3 things that you would suggest somebody do to get there?
Well, I think you need to acknowledge that you maybe don't have it all figured out. I think that's with anything. Right now, there's a big focus for me. I'm an athletic guy. I retired from football some years ago. And, I was looking for that thing that, made me feel excited about going and working out because I just didn't want to do it anymore. I was getting a little bit fluffy, if you know what I mean. And so I had to admit that, for me, that I first of all, I was kind of in a funk, right? I was looking for something and I didn't know what to call it. And so I just tried, I started investigating things, right? And so one of the things I investigated was CrossFit.
Okay.
And for me, it was one of those outlets where it was really hard, right? But when you see the results of things that are really hard, I think it's evident that for me it was going to be similar to football, and there's a great community of people there. So I had to admit that I wasn't enjoying what I was doing. I wasn't getting fulfilled from it, and it wasn't working, right? Because I didn't want to do it, and so I had to find something new. And I think same thing goes with finding a solution that works within your company, right? You have to admit that there's a problem. I think secondarily is just be inquisitive, just be curious, intellectually curious about what you may be missing, and be willing to admit that you don't have it all figured out. Because I can tell you, if you're not one of those, companies that has 200,000 employees working for you, you probably haven't figured it all out yet, right? Because if you had the best systems and the best this and the best that, your company would grow so fast, right? And so be willing to admit that you don't know everything, and just be curious about it. You'll meet some good people and you'll meet some not so good people. And that's just the way it is. Write those ones off. And I think thirdly, be willing to take risks, right? Because, if you always stay safe, you're never going to get to where you want to be. And I go back to my CrossFit. I took a risk because I'm, 6'3", 240 pounds. And at that time I was almost 260 pounds and I could barely do a pull-up, which for me, I was a professional athlete. So that was a little bit embarrassing. So I took a risk and I went to a place where I didn't know anything about, the community. I didn't know anything about the workouts. And I just put myself in a vulnerable place. And my wife did the same about 2 years ago. And so now it's something that we do together, and it's awesome. But we both had to take risks and get in that uncomfortable place, right? And I think you have to be willing to do that with change as well.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I think a lot of the folks in these roles kind of are entrepreneurs of some type. And what got them to the level that they're at is because, unlike others, they were willing to take some risk, right? They were willing to go out on a limb and just give it a shot, right? And say, you know what, I'm willing to get a couple of cuts, bruises, and scars to get there. I mean, you wouldn't have gotten into the level of performance that you got to had you not without doing that.
Right.
So I like this idea that there's something more that I want. And you can be completely selfish there and saying, hey, I know there's a problem here, but there's something more that I want. And that becomes sort of the magnetism, that becomes the vacuum that draws you forward. And then just trying to figure out what is it? What do I call it? What do I name it? So I can now start to learn about it and just take a step. I mean, I think that's the journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step, right?
Right.
What else I mean, well, I guess where I'm trying to go with is, if someone wants to get started with you, how do they get started? Is it a complex process or easy process? What does that look like?
Yeah. So to get to know me, it doesn't take much. I mean, I'm a pretty open guy, but as far as the process with us, honestly, it's a discovery process for both parties, right? If you're looking for a system that could potentially help you, level up your ability to, first of all, get the data that's, you need to support better decisions. But secondly, provide world-class HR to your employees, and just a world-class experience to them. Then, let's have a Q&A, right? We want to understand, what are the pitfalls that you're falling into right now? What are some of the challenges you're having that are preventing you to get from point A to point B? We'll be completely transparent with you. And we ask that, and as far as you feel comfortable, be as transparent as you possibly can be, so that, we can understand if we could potentially be a good fit for your organization. And sometimes the answer is not now, right? And that's okay. And oftentimes that comes from us. You're not ready, but we're able to connect them with people, with our experience that can help them, get the pieces in place so that they can take the right steps. And in many cases, we are a great fit. I mean, we're pretty fast. And, again, I think I mentioned early on, our approach is very much about what the customer needs and not necessarily what we want to deploy. And so, here at People Strategy, we don't have monthly quotas and all those things. We're not going to be trying to, ABCU, always be closing. I think you've got to take a personalized approach, and we're all just human beings. And so that's the approach that we take at People Strategy, because we put people first.
Yeah. I've got your contact information. I would love to put that into the comments if you're okay with that, just so people have that information. Just if they have any questions or just want to get more from you. Oops. I just lost, I think I just lost you. So if anyone is, hey there. Yeah, so I was just saying that if I'll have your contact information, I'll put it in the comments, after we post this. If anyone's got any questions for you, I'll encourage them to reach out to you or reach out to me, and I'll connect you with Troy. I think there's a lot of good information here. I think for me, one of the take-home messages, and I've started to hear this lots of places, or this is sort of an underlying theme. I used to think of HR as a way of mitigating risk. And I think that is the wrong way to think about it. Yeah. It's completely ass backwards. It's the other way around, right? It's all about creating greater profitability, scalability, just overall success of the company. I mean, if you lean into the people, I always say, if I can hire people for their minds, but if I get their hearts, I win. And I think that's the way to think about this, is if people start to lean in with a data-driven HR approach in their organization, they should be able to kind of find the key to unlock each individual and get maximum value out of their employment. And not in a bad way. I think in a collaborative way, in a good way.
Yeah. Well, I think the legacy are the people that you leave behind, right? And so you were talking, we only have a finite amount of time here. And I think the investment you make in people is never returns void. And, data allows you to understand your employees better, right? And if you can understand them better, then you can communicate better. You can set up the right programs that people will use and leverage. You can communicate properly. You can, help your leaders develop the skills they need to continue to help your organization thrive. One of the things that Burton Goldfield used to say when I worked at China is that he wanted to build an enduring company, a company that stands the test of time, right? That goes far beyond. And when you look back at the track record of many organizations, they don't endure past the first generation. They may make it into the second generation, unless your goal is to sell, right? And I understand, a lot of tech startups, that's the goal. Build it up and, get funding and then sell it for millions of dollars. But most of us are never going to run successful businesses like that, where, you have some huge exit, just to be honest. And so if you don't want to leave a wake of people behind you, right? And I think if you always focus on the people, what will happen is that those people, the ROI on that will be 10 times what you could have squeezed out of them. Yeah. I love that perspective.
So the tagline that's coming to mind for this episode of this conversation really is, if you really love your people, prove it with data.
Yeah, I like it.
Right. Well, thanks, Troy. I appreciate this. As always, every time I talk to you, I get something out of it. So appreciate you sharing your insights, your perspective on things. So, any other last thoughts or comments?
No, I don't know that I have any last comments. I would encourage everybody that, look, this is the data journey is something that everybody feels a little bit intimidated by, right? And so, if you pick a good partner, what I would say is that partner will help you set it up. They'll lead you. If they do it right, they'll lead you to the water, and they'll let you drink, right? So, as far as, if you're a visual person like I am, I like to see my data visually, right? A good example of that would be having them set up the dashboard the way you want to see data, even telling you what might be important for you to look at right now. And only a good partner is going to be able to do that versus just giving you a tool that you don't understand and don't know how to leverage. And so I would ask more questions about how are you going to help me deploy this? What is this going to look like 30, 60, 90, a year from now, right? And those questions should give you the idea of the caliber of person you're dealing with, not just the level of or the skill set that they have around sales.
Good point. I think that's the right questions to ask for sure.
So,
everyone who's been joining us, thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully, you got some really good insights out of Troy. I always do. So hopefully, you did as well. Troy, thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, brother.
Yeah. Talk to you soon.
All right. Take care.